Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unleashing Potentials podcast. Today's special guest is Roberto. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. What a pleasure to be on your platform.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. Can you tell our listeners where you're tuning in from?
Yes. Again, my name is Roberto Germán. I'm tuning in from Tampa, Florida, where today is not as sunny as it typically is. We have a nice breeze, so that allowed for me to play a little more pickleball today.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, the
No problem.
weather's getting ready to shift in so many places. Yeah, it
Yes, and
doesn't
I
snow
understand
there?
that you're up north. You're up north, extremely north. So shifting weather means you better get the layers out.
Oh, I already got them out.
Oh Lord, I don't
Yeah,
miss that.
yeah, they're completely out. Yeah. Can you share with us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Roberto Germán, author, speaker, trainer as it relates to anti-bias, anti-racist practices, former former school principal. I was an educator for 18 years in public schools, private schools, charter schools, all types of schools, pre-K 3 through 12th grade. And so classroom instruction, working with youth, supporting teachers has been at the core of what I've done professionally for the majority of my career. And in the past couple of years, since moving from Texas to Florida, started focusing full time on my business as an educational consultant, as a content creator. My business is Multicultural Classroom, and my wife and I support school leaders, support educators as it relates to implementing anti-racist strategies in their approach, in their practice, helping them expand their toolbox. So under the umbrella of what we do, we create content for social media to support educators and others. We create content through authorship, publishing several books. I published my first book, Blue Ink Tears, a collection of poems, this
Mhm.
earlier this year at the end of January. And then my wife, Lorena Germán, has a few instructional books that we've published and also one through a publisher.
Mhm.
And then we also have other content we create through my podcast, Our Classroom.
Mhm. Wow. That's a lot of powerful work that you guys are doing. And yeah, you're an author. Tell me more about your book.
Yes. So my book, Blue Ink Tears, a collection of poems. This is something that is near and dear to me because it captures my experiences over the past 20 years. It's
Mm.
an idea that I have when I was a freshman or sophomore in college. I just didn't really know how to bring it all together. I didn't understand the process of publishing books. I didn't have the resources, didn't have the support, but I had all of these experiences that I was going through, and I had to write them down. I had to capture these moments, not just for me, but the experiences of others, just observing and noting things down and trying to find a way to convey that through my words, because it's through writing, it's through poetry and through music that I really found healing for a lot of the stuff that I was going through. That became an outlet for me. So instead of turning to the streets, instead of turning to violence, instead of turning to alcohol, instead of turning to the things that were not going to be helpful or productive for me, I would turn to my writing. And that became a source, a tool for me to just channel not only my thoughts, but also my emotions. And as a man in the society, a lot of times the message that we receive, whether it's communicated explicitly or whether it's just subtly understood, is that we're not supposed to show emotions. We're supposed to hold it in. We're supposed to be big, bad, and tough. Boys don't cry type stuff, right?
Mhm.
All that holding it in was consuming me.
Mhm.
And literally holding your emotions in will impact you physically, right? The stress, the anxiety, it'll manifest itself in terms of how it impacts your body. And so thankfully I started realizing I needed to find some other ways to channel some of these emotions that I was holding.
Mhm. What a beautiful outlet to have. And you guys, I was looking through his book. You took you took me at least on a journey. It wasn't just like any type of book. There were pictures there of you and family members and you growing up. It's a journey, and you took me there. And also part of your poetry in the book is in Spanish. Can you tell us the significance of having it in Spanish and English?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for asking that question. For me, one of the themes that I touched upon in the book is identity, cultural identity, language identity. They factor in to the person of Roberto Herman. And so, given that my family's from Dominican Republic, that I grew up in a Spanish-speaking household, it was important for me to work that into my book, because I know that some of my audience are my people. Some of my audience are family members, they're friends, they're others, and maybe they're even people that don't know me, but we have some type of connection, whether through the language or through my Dominican culture, Caribbean culture, whatever the case may be, right? And so when I'm writing, I'm thinking about how can I communicate this, and is there a way for me to expand my reach? Because I know my voice matters. And because my voice matters and the stories that I'm sharing matter, they're not just my story. They're also stories that other people can relate to because they've been through something similar. And me, even if they haven't, that's fine. Because if they haven't been through it, then it's exposing them to a different perspective, to a different experience. Just like I read stuff that exposes me to experiences that aren't my experiences, but they help broaden my perspective, my lens, my understanding. And so I wanted to work that in because it's part of who I am. But I also wanted to work it in because sometimes I have received the message that I'm not enough of this or I'm not enough of that, right? I'm not Dominican enough, or my Spanish is not polished enough, or along those lines, right? And so I wanted to combat those narratives. Like, I feel like part of my duty, not just as a person, but as a writer, is to deconstruct the unhealthy narratives. You're not going to catch me just sitting here complaining about stuff. I'm always going to be working towards doing something, towards bringing some type of resolution or some type of change, or challenging and encouraging. I'm always going to be pushing the envelope. And so I feel like that's part of what I'm doing with my writing and tapping into the Spanish. And as I continue to write, I'll work in other languages that I'm somewhat familiar with. Even if it's just a word here, a word there, a few sentences, just to, again, have those touch points with other groups of people. Like you mentioned that you're Haitian. I have family members that have Haitian roots, have Haitian origins. And so, I would love to. I wrote a song called ID. And it was an ode to the Haitian people, showing love, showing solidarity, because we know the history of the island of Hispaniola. There's been historical tension between Dominicans and Haitians. I'm not with that. I'm with unity and peace. I'm with bringing people together. I don't have all the answers, but I know the answer is not for us to look at each other in disdain. I know we're better if we're together, if we're in harmony, right? And I think that's a universal message, especially given what we know is going on in the world today. And so I'm using my writing to be an advocate for peace. I'm using my writing to try to communicate with others, to bring others into the fold, and hoping that through that, something resonates with them, with the audience, that will push them to either want to get to know me, want to get to know my writing, or want to get to know people like me, right? Maybe you'll never connect with me, but perhaps my writing will push you to see somebody that you view as the other differently.
Yeah, wow, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on, the history of Haiti and the DR. Most people don't know, uh, we had to sign treaty to split the land and conflict that went on. But I feel your love for humanity, and I can see that you don't split how you write, how you see people based on where they're from, right? And the culture identity and blending it in. I'm from Haiti and I'm in Canada. And those are two cultures that I've had to marry into and still remain authentic to who I am and still remember where I came from. And I know maybe there are people watching or listening to this interview right now that they have many different backgrounds and cultures that they have to blend into. How can we blend our cultures and remain authentic to our roots and who we are?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the way I learned to do that was by continuing to do research around the different aspects of my identity. Because we all have that intersectionality. And so I very much embrace my Dominican heritage. My parents immigrated from the Dominican Republic. So did my oldest sister. So my household culturally extremely Dominican. And I was born in the United States of America. So I'm not denying that aspect of who I am. Very much American as apple pie. and I try to embrace that. Even if there's things that I don't like about either places, right? If there are things that I don't necessarily like about the Dominican culture or things that I see or history or whatnot, just like there are plenty of things that I don't like about the American culture and things that have happened in this country. But there's also beauty and richness in both, right? And so I try to embrace that. I try to not lose perspective. I try to stay polished up on history, but also current events. And I try to reconnect. So periodically, I've been able to go back to the Dominican Republic to spend time with family, to explore while I'm out there. And I try to suspend my assumptions. So each time I go, I'm going in hungry. I'm going in leading with curiosity, asking a lot of questions, doing more listening than I am doing talking. I'm like, hey, listen, you're here full time. You tell me. Y'all tell me things that I need to know, things that I need to better understand. Because it's one thing you reading it in a book or you hearing it, hearing it on social media. It's another thing for you to experience it firsthand with people that are on the ground. So I try to leave room for that. And then maintaining intentions about being in community with all types of people, and definitely people that represent my various identities. Learning from the elders, right? Listening to the elders, trying to understand their experiences, because it's a very different world that I'm coming up in than it was for them. And so I try to leave room for me to hear from others and for me to appreciate that. And then whenever possible, for me to capture that.
Yeah.
Because now I got the content down, right? I'm writing down your words, I'm documenting, I'm archiving, and that may turn into something. That may turn into a book that I publish. It may not. It may just be notes that I have that end up being for me to revisit, for me to remember, for me to connect, for me to stay in tune with these parts of who I am. So those are simple ways that I go about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I find your writing to be so captivating. There's something in each poem that kind of takes you somewhere. It's not somewhere on the outside. it forces people to go inward. That's what I find when I was reading and looking through your book. It took me to a place that felt like a memory, if I may put it that way, and it awakened that part of me. And that's the type of work that you're doing. That's the impact that you're making, whether you're in the States or I'm here in Canada, right? Speaking of writing, though, I want to hear, when did you start writing? And are you working on other books right now?
Yes, two good questions. So I started writing I was in seventh grade, so I believe it was 1993.
Mm.
In seventh grade, Jose Tutal Hernandez was walking home with his cousin. He had a bike, but they were walking. They were in the Arlington district in Lawrence, Massachusetts, where I'm from, which is a tough city.
Mm.
Somebody tried to rob them for the bike along the way. Tutal wouldn't give it up. The guy shot Tutal. Tutal ended up in the hospital, and thankfully he recovered. While in the hospital, Steve Kelly asked me to write him a poem. Now, I didn't see myself as a writer, but Steve saw something in me that I just hadn't recognized in myself at that time. Because I had love for Steve, he was my basketball coach, and I loved him. All right, you know, if Steve's asking me to do it, I got to do it. So I wrote the poem for Tutal. That was the event that got me started on my journey as a writer.
Wow.
The following year, another tragic event happens. Louis Dookie LeBron stole the car radio on Lawrence Street. The owner of the vehicle came out as Dookie was running away, shot him in the back a few times. He was murdered. Writing became the way I dealt with these problems because I didn't know how else to deal with it. I didn't have a counselor. You know, there were probably things happening in my life that even my parents weren't fully aware of. So writing became that outlet for me. And it started in 1993, seventh grade. Thankfully, I didn't just have tragic things happening in my life. There were plenty of good things happening, and I was writing about those experiences also, whether it was certain relationships or even basketball, right? There's a poem in my book about basketball.
Yeah.
It's titled Found Her. And so writing about things that are relevant, that are pertinent to all of my experience, the triumphs and the trials. And to me, that's part of how I keep it authentic.
Yeah.
Because I'm not creating fables here. The writing is true to what I'm going through or to what other people around me are experiencing. I can certainly lighten the mood, but at least with this first book, I'm like, listen, I'm giving it to them raw.
You did.
I wanted the audience to really feel the highs and lows of what I've been through in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Including the loss of my father, which happened last year. And at the end of the book, I have two poems about him. And I have a photo in there. It was me and my father at a hotel in Dominican Republic. And these were very difficult pieces for me to write.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, in doing so, I was able to mourn. I was able to grieve. And I was also able to honor his legacy. And if you don't mind, I want to read.
Yes, please. Yeah.
One of the poems. His Faith, dedicated to Cecilio Germán. Up early with the sun, knees sore from prayer, then phone calls and home visits to neighbors. Amidst his own pain, dialysis times a week, weakened body, needing rest, shivers, colds, fevers, coughs, pain, paid their rents, funded their groceries until they stood on their own 2 feet. He understood when you arrived in the USA, ain't no boots, ain't no straps, burdens of others. Strapped on his back, he carried a cross, dwelling under the shadow of the Almighty, always believing and trusting in the Lord. These were his words on the tip of his tongue, an encouragement to others. My father pastored a herd of men that were like fatherless children along the right path through tranquility, temptation, and turbulence, reprimanded when necessary, never abandoned, rather reminded, me, you, them. The Lord awaits you.
Wow. That one packed a punch.
Thank you, thank you. This piece was a way for me not to just grieve the loss of my father, but for me to honor his legacy. And that was important to me, to be able to capture a piece of who he was, to frame him in this way, to highlight how essential his faith was to who he was. And I have young children. My children are 8, 5, and 2. And my 2-year-old never got to meet my father in person because he had stage 5 kidney disease. So in the last year of his life, I didn't want to fly up there. I didn't want to potentially expose him to COVID or anything of the sort. But my daughter's going to be able to read these words one day.
Yeah.
And understand for herself who my father was. She's going to be able to see the photo I put in the book. She's going to be able to read the following poem, which I wrote literally. Bedside, hospital room, final minutes of his life on earth.
Wow.
My kids,
yes. Wow.
My kids are going to be able to read that. And in that sense, I keep his memory alive. I keep his legacy alive. In that sense, I get to honor my father, who sacrificed a lot for me and my siblings to be here in this country and live the life that we do.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is powerful. And I love that you write from a place of pain and passion at the same time. And you're right, you're leaving a legacy, and you're living the legacy and leaving it. And you're remembering at the same time. And your kids are very grateful. And I know they're gonna look back, like you said, and they're gonna see how you processed your pain and grief, and how you remembered Grandpa. Yeah. You're also a spoken word artist. Can you tell our listeners, my listeners, what that is? What is that?
Yeah, simply, some writers, some poets, they write simply for you to read, which is fine. I have pieces that are simply pieces for you to read. But I lean more towards spoken word, which is more performance poetry. So even when I share my work, it's a different experience for you to read it than for you to hear it.
Yeah.
And my writing style is I write in a way where I'm like, I could see myself delivering certain pieces even when I'm writing, and I'm like, all right, how would this come off if I had an audience in front of me, if I was live?
Yeah.
What could I do to help them connect more with the message that I'm trying to convey? So spoken word artist is simply somebody who takes their poetry and delivers it in an oral manner to engage their audience in a more intimate way, I would argue.
Yeah. Did that take a lot of practice to do? Like to remember the full poem? Because I can look at a poem I write and read it versus nothing in my hand and I'm delivering.
Yes, it definitely does. And when I was younger, I would commit myself more to memorizing all the pieces and
Wow.
engaging in different events, including slam poetry, which is competition, right?
Yeah.
Spoken word competitions.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done slam poetry in a while, and I don't memorize the pieces like I used to because I have 3 kids. I also just, with time, I find it harder to retain everything. And so I at this stage, I give myself a lot more grace to open up and just read the pieces, or, have it on my phone and say pieces. Now, there are certain pieces that, when you share them enough, then it becomes second nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Additionally, because I have a music background as a rapper and also one who has written music for others, I incorporate that into what I do with my spoken word. I'm actually working on a spoken word album, which is separate from my audiobook.
Yeah.
The audiobook for Blueing Tears, it's going to be me simply reading it. And it's fine. I think people are going to love the audiobook. The spoken word album will be select poems for Blueing Tears that I really wrote, and I know they're like performance pieces that they're going to have instrumentation behind them. It's going to be a whole different experience. I'm telling you, folks got to get the book. Then they got to get the audio book. They got to get the spoken word album, because the spoken word album that I'm working on with my cousin Moises Diaz, who's out here in Florida also, who's doing a lot of the production, and my brother Danny Suriel, who's in Massachusetts, who's also doing some production, him and Eliezer Diaz, and Danny's also going to mix the album. The spoken word album is just going to be like a completely different vibe, a whole different experience. It's going to be wild.
Wow.
And I'm working on a coloring book for Blueing Tears too.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, who is on the book cover and how did you come up with the title of your book?
Yeah, that's yours truly. All right. That's me on the cover. Shout out to Fresh Creativo for the photography, and to Monica Cohen, who did the design. Not just the cover design, but Monica designed the interior of the book also. So for folks looking for a photographer, at Fresh Creativo, if you're looking for a designer, Monica Cohen is your person. How did I come up with that? Well, I had the title since I was like freshman, sophomore in college, since I was about 19 years old. I had that title. I was sitting, I had drafts of this book, and I thought it was great then. I didn't realize it wasn't, but I thought it was great then. And then when I moved here from Texas to Florida a couple years ago, hired an editor. Shout out to Tanya Manning-Yard, my editor, who pushed me. And sometimes I'm like, nah, this feels complete. And she'll come back with some more feedback. And we just went through it.
Yeah.
And she helped me get this thing right. And so we did the photography here in Tampa. Monica did the cover. Blueing Tears, the title was simply, when I thought about this as an 18, 19-year-old, I was just thinking about like, hey, what's a phrase I could use to capture my expressions? And I do have a poem in the book titled Blueing Tears, but really it was about, I always had a pen on me. I was always writing. So I wanted to work that concept in there, right? Ink.
Yeah.
Blue's my favorite color. And so the color blue makes me happy, but blue can also be used to represent a saddened mood. Right?
Yeah.
So the high, the swing of that, blue making me happy, but also blue being a lower mood.
Yeah.
And then tears, the tears, oftentimes for me, if I didn't have real tears coming through, because what I said earlier, the internalization that as a man, you're not supposed to cry and whatnot, then my tears became the ink for my pen.
Ooh, that's
Hence the title
powerful.
Blooming Tears.
Wow. I love that. Oh my goodness. I'm speechless. It hit me. That is so
And
cool.
I know that's hard to do, Bernadette, because I've seen some of your other interviews. So leaving you speechless
I
is
know. I
not an
know.
easy task.
I'm not normally speechless. I have so much to say always. Yeah, I'm just absorbing your wisdom and your passion and what you do and how you do it. And yeah, wow. Also, do you have a podcast?
I do have a podcast titled Our Classroom. Again, my background is as an educator, 18 years, classroom teacher, basketball coach, assistant principal, lead principal. And so I bring all of that with me into the podcast experience. And while I do interview a lot of educators, it's not just about educators. It's not just about what's happening in the four walls of the schoolhouse. It's about education journeys. And so I love listening to people share their educational journeys, but also share their experience regardless of the industry that they're in, so that we can understand how it can potentially apply in a classroom setting, how we can potentially bring this to our learners. And when I'm using learners, I'm not just thinking about young people, we're all learners. And so what can we extract from all these different experiences, whether I'm talking to Sergio Munoz, who's a banker, or I'm talking to Trisha, and Kim and Lorena and Julia from Hashtag Disrupt Text, all literary geniuses and educators who are doing awesome work. Or I'm talking to George Father Reed III, who I will be interviewing as we talk about the Bruce's Beach case and reparations, and that being a model for reparations for Black folks in America. And so I like to dig into a lot of different topics because there's also a lot that I don't know. And so I need to hear from others. So the Our Classroom podcast not only gives me the opportunity to hear and learn from others, but it gives my audience the opportunity to do the same.
Wow, I love that. You also call it multicultural classroom.
The podcast is Our Classroom, and Multicultural Classroom is the big umbrella. That's the name of my business.
Okay.
All right. So under the umbrella of Multicultural Classroom is the Our Classroom podcast and all the products that we put out, books, video courses, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love that it's a classroom, because that's kind of how I see life, is that we get older, potentially wiser, and we continue to learn. We never stop learning in life, no matter how old we are, no matter what language we speak. It's a learning process. The fact that you turned that into a podcast, like, it's open for anyone to come and to share. And it's a
Absolutely.
teaching environment as well. Yeah, that's so cool. Wow. So
Absolutely.
yeah. What are some other projects that you're working on? I know you're working on your album, but what else are you working on?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, working on the audiobook for Blooming Tears. There's one little technical thing that we need to clean up, but other than that, it's pretty much finished, and it'll be available hopefully within the next month.
Wow.
Working on the spoken word album for Blooming Tears. I'm probably going to need a little more time for that, perhaps 2 to 3 more months before that project's ready, but it is coming along. Working on a coloring book for Blooming Tears because I want to make the content available. The book is really written for a young adult audience, so teenagers, young adults, and beyond. I want to make it available to little kids also. And so I figured one way to make it available to littles is to offer them a coloring book.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do a coloring book for Blooming Tears that creates images out of certain poems, like lizards. I have a haiku titled Lizards. There'll be coloring pages for that. And some of the coloring pages will have text, either poems like the haiku that's short enough, or excerpts of certain poems. And then a few other projects that we got going on. I recently spoke at the Affirming Fatherhood Conference here in Tampa, Florida through Reach Up Inc. And through my presentation, in which I was one of the keynotes, it really inspired me to work off of my keynote of the power of fatherhood stories. So now I'm focusing on writing a book about fatherhood stories, because I feel like there needs to be a movement that encourages and affirms fathers. There needs to be a book that encourages and affirms fathers, and there needs to be space for fathers to tell their stories. Right? Because if I'm hearing the story of other fathers, I could feel encouraged or challenged for that matter. And hopefully it's also going to be a way for I want the book to push fathers to be in community with one another.
Ooh.
You know, we need to do a better job of supporting and loving one another, and being real with one another and sharing our trials and our triumphs.
That's going to be a really good book. I think it's going to be popular because there are so many men and fathers that needs the help in community. They don't have it. And at times, you know, men and women, we think differently. So when you have the brothers together, you guys get each other. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. And we got to move beyond just getting together for sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, our conversations need to go deeper than that.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything else we haven't touched on that you'd like to share with my audience?
Yeah, let's see. Well, real quick, my wife and I are also working on a book for Christian educators. We practice the Christian faith, we follow Jesus. And so we've been thinking about, how do we take some of the stuff that we see, that we feel, that we experience as it relates to matters of justice, and as it relates to inequities that we see in the educational settings, and how do we speak to Christian educators? How would we put that lens on and say, like, hey, you know, the scriptures and Jesus challenge us to do X, Y, Z, and what are the implications for that? Given that you are an educator and given that you follow Jesus. And so we want to speak to that particular audience, since that's also our background. So that's one project we're working on. And then the other thing I want to say is, for those that are considering publishing a book, but maybe you've hit a wall, maybe you're stumbling, maybe you don't know how to go about the process. Hey, listen to me. I've been there. I know what that feels like. I waited 20 years before I published my book. And thank God I was able to do it. You don't have to wait that long. I don't regret anything. But now that I know what I know, I'm like, oh, okay, let's go. I published one, I can publish two, I published two, I can publish three. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
If I could do this, you can do it. Trust me. Because it's not that I'm the brightest bulb. I think I am pretty bright. But me producing this book is not because I'm the smartest. It's not because I'm the best writer. It's not because I'm the most popular. It's simply because I committed myself to seeing it through. I did the reading I had to do. I did the research. I asked the questions. I talked to all types of support folks, whether it's folks that have published through a publisher, I talked to them. Folks that self-publish, I talked to them. I ordered a book on self-publishing. I talked to experts on Amazon in terms of KDP. I did all the research. I met with different publishing houses, and then I said, all right, what's going to be the best course for me, for Roberto? And I determined I didn't want anybody to have the rights to my content. Definitely not my first book. I'm not saying I won't go through a publisher. I'm just saying this book, it was too personal for me to give up. Like, I have to have the rights to this thing, even if I only sell 10 copies. Thank God I've sold way more than 10 copies. But at the end of the day, for me, it was less about the sales and more about getting my content out to the world. I was not going to work on any other book. Even if somebody asked me to contribute to their book, which I have had folks in my circle ask me, I said, I'm not doing anything else until I get this book out. And so for those of you who perhaps are a little stuck, I want to challenge and encourage you to see the process through, to reach out to whoever you need to reach out to so that you get the counsel that you need, to implement the action steps that will help you see this through.
Yeah.
Because it's possible.
Yeah.
And feel free to reach out to me at Multicultural Classroom across all platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Multicultural Classroom 1, LinkedIn at Multicultural Classroom, through my website, multiculturalclassroom.com. Fill out an inquiry form and let me know what you want to talk about. I'm happy to chop it up and give you some insight. I'm not the expert, but I have done this. And so whatever I know, I'm willing to pass along because I want to see other people winning. We are not in competition. The world wants to paint it that way so that we're always opposing each other instead of helping each other. I'm not seeing other writers as in competition with me. I just see them as other writers. We're in community if you want to be. So for anybody who wants to be in community and they want to figure out the next steps as to how to make it happen and publishing their book, holla at me.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. What is the meaning of life for you?
The meaning of life. That's a deep, like, existential question, but
yeah.
I'll reframe that if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead.
The purpose of my life is to love and serve my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and to love and serve my neighbors. Sometimes I do that well. Sometimes I could do it a lot better. But at the end of the day, that's my purpose, to worship God and to leave a mark, leave my legacy of doing the kingdom work here while I'm on earth, loving my neighbors, getting to know my neighbors, serving my neighbors, trying to build community, no matter how similar or different they may be to me.
Wow, I love that. Well, Roberto, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for sharing your writing with me and my audience. And I just look forward to connecting with you more and to get a copy of your book.
Hey, thank you for having me on your platform. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I salute you. I encourage you. I love what you're doing. I've checked out some of the interviews and I'm grateful for you.
Thank you.
Making space for folks like me to come and share our stories. It's important work. And so please, please, please keep pressing on. You're making an impact. You're making a difference.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.